Hey everyone, welcome back. Well, it's another cold January day, but it's nice and cozy in here by the wood fire. And the plan for this pot is to use these little houses in it. I made these little houses a couple of months ago. The wife did the painting on them. And I just got these roofs cut out and epoxied on. And these are fashioned after Nova Scotia fish shacks, where a lot of lobster traps and fishing gear are stored. So I thought it'd be fun to have some little buildings in one. So the next step is to cut this template out. So we'll get to going on that now. There's our shape, but the jigsaw leaves it really rough, so we'll give it a good sanding now. All right, here's my template ready to go. What I was looking for on this one was for it not to be symmetrical anywhere. I'm pretty happy with it. So this will be the jig for making the sand. And it has about two and a quarter right here. So the depth of this pot will be about 2.25 inch. And this is the trowel that I'm going to use. And this is the one that I made in the video about how to make these. And I just got the top of it bent so that it's flat on top. Once I get the pot made, I usually bend that up so I can keep using it and it doesn't interfere with the feet. So the next step is to get the sand set up in here. So we'll get after that now. So the main thing with the sand on the inside of these pots is you don't want it too wet. It doesn't take much moisture for the sand to stick together. And if you get too much water in the sand, when you go to put the concrete around it, it can pollute your mix, and the Portland can suck the water out of the sand and it can become too soupy, and I've had that happen to me before, and it was a real bummer. I had to just stop and take it all off, and I couldn't make the pot. So sometimes I let the sand sit overnight if I think it's too wet. But I was planning on making this pot right after I put this sand on, so I made sure that it wasn't very wet, and it turned out to be just right. So it really works for me moving that little plywood piece back and forth, kind of jiggling it as I go by the sand to avoid knocking it off. You can see it knocked it off there on the corner, and sharp corners are the place where it's the most tedious with it. You have to just take your time, and if you're thinking about making these pots, I wouldn't start with one that's irregular shaped. It's much harder. The best thing to start with is a nice little oval. It's much easier to shape the outside corners than inside corners. All the inside corners on this pot turned out to be fairly difficult and took a lot more work than the outside corners. So I always use the trowel to pack it down before I start. And once I get it set up, it's really important to clean the table really well. So here's the sand all ready to go. Pot's going to have some nice curves in it. And here's our mix. And it's that time. Time for the water to hit the concrete. Alright, we're ready to make this pot. And in this mix I've used a terracotta dye and a black dye mixed together, and it makes a nice brown color. And what I've started doing with them is intentionally taking it past the point with the water to help to incorporate the dye into it. And then I go back and add a pot of sand and Portland to it. And it's gotten it just right. And the way to test your mortar is to stick your trowel in it and pull it up. And if it stays like that, then you know you're good. Gravity can't affect it. So this one's good to go. So first part, as usual, is to basically ice the cake. I'll go all the way around it and get a layer of it all the way around. So I'm not going to use any steel in this pot. I have many pots that I haven't used steel in that have not cracked. And what I've figured out is that fine sand is not a good idea because there's nothing for the Portland to grab onto. That's why when you get a bag of ready mix, it has a lot of gravel in it, because the Portland really needs something to grab onto for strength. So I always add a nice amount of aggregate into the mix, like a pea gravel. And it does make it a little bit harder to work with the trowel, but it makes the pots much stronger. So there's kind of a give and take there. It's easier to work with fine sand, but the pots that I've done that way have developed cracks in the rims. So this one, I've got a nice amount of pea gravel in with the sand. So now I'm working on the bottom of the pot, and I'm just shooting for about an inch thick. I'll take all the excess off after the trowel work. The trowel will tell me what's sticking up past the plane that I want. So if you can ice a cake, you can make one of these. Because now I'm just going to fill in that area there between the bottom and the top, and basically make it like an iced cake. This is the reason why they always need dressing on the inside, because you always end up with cracks on these pots because you can't really vibrate it all together. So once it's turned over, I always dress the inside of these pots and fill all those cracks, and we'll be doing that at the end. So once I get the sand all covered up, it's important to go back with the trowel and remove anything that's sticking out past the template. And that's why you really need one of these little flat trowels. I've used this little flat trowel right from the beginning of making these pots, and it's the ideal thing. This would be hard to do with a triangle trowel, a pointy trowel. So a square trowel like that is a great tool to have. So I just want to remove anything that's sticking out past the template so that my trowel can ride on that template. Because the first pass is really important to get a basic shape going. And those inside corners there, they turned out to be difficult. They're hard to do with the trowel. Much easier to do the outside corners with it. So once I'm satisfied that I've got it all back where it's not sticking out past the template, it's important to clean that area where the trowel is going to ride on the table. You just don't want anything to interrupt it. So it's good to have a tub of water to keep the trowel wet. And it's just a matter of keeping pressure against the template. Nice big pot like this, you can push on it pretty hard because it's so heavy. You don't have to worry about it moving. One of the nice things about concrete is you have a lot of time to work, especially when it's cold like it is now. That's why I like to make them in the wintertime, because there's no pressure really. You can actually let it sit for quite a while if you want. You don't have to rush. There's lots of work time with it. concrete really responds to temperature, and if you're working where it's really hot, you have to work with it much faster than if it's cold. So it's just a matter of putting more and more layers on there, and going back to the trowel and until it's all got concrete where it needs it. And just like any concrete, the more you trowel it, the better it looks. All right, we're getting pretty close to the shape we're looking for. So this is the time when I've got to go all the way around it and find all the places that need to be filled in. I need for this line on the trowel to go all the way around with no interruptions. Like right here, it needs a little bit. So we'll just lay some in there. Fix this little spot. So I'm basically going to go all the way around it and make sure it's all right. It starts to act better and better the longer you let it sit. And I want to make sure that I get all the way on this inside curve. See, I've got a little bit of stuff there, so I need to push a little bit harder. Get down to the template. So basically I'm just going to go all the way around it and find any places that need to be fixed. And then I need to get all this stuff off the top of it that's sticking up. Try to get the bottom of it nice and flat. So I'll do all of that work and then we'll be ready for feet, and I'll be back with you. So before we put the feet on, I want to get the drainage holes in there. This is a piece of 1-inch copper, and it works just like a drill bit through the concrete. Works really well. So this is a trowel that I made for the feet. It's just a piece of sheet metal nailed to that little piece of wood. And I've always made my feet this way. They've worked out really well for me. I've never had one come break off the pot. At this point, it sticks together really well. So this one's going to have 4 feet. And while I have the trowel on there, I just want to get it, make sure it's all packed together in one solid piece. That's the main thing to do when you have it in that corralled in the trowel. So they're quite a bit bigger there than they're going to end up because that trowel is about a 3/4 of an inch, and I want the feet to end up being about a 1/2 inch. So I'm basically going to smush them down about a 1/4 inch. So I'll do that after I get this last one on there. So for that, I'm going to use a piece of MDF because I know it's nice and flat. It's really important to have a flat piece of wood for this. This is a round piece of MDF that I know is perfectly flat. And then I'm basically just going to smush them down about a 1/4 inch, get them down to where they're about a 1/2 inch thick. So now that I've got them flat, that spreads them out some. So I usually do some shaping on them. I'll cut the corners off and put a little shape into them. You can basically shape them any way you want to with the trowel. So I have another little trowel that I made, which is it's just a little board with a piece of sheet metal screwed to it, and there it is. And I use that because it's about a 1/2 inch wide piece of sheet metal. So I use that to trowel the edge of the feet, because you have to use some kind of metal on the concrete to get it to be smooth. A sponge puts a different kind of finish on it, and I'll eventually use a sponge all over the bottom of it. But if you want it to have a really smooth look, then you have to use a piece of steel on it. And this little trowel has been really useful for doing this and fixing little areas that need to be troweled. I've made them all from powder coated steel, from roofing steel. And it's time to get the signature in there. I got it signed, and now with the wet sponge, I use these round sponges and cut them in half so I get a nice flat bottom on them. And they work really well to go along the edge of the feet, and basically it makes it makes a different kind of finish than a trowel, but it's really nice for the bottom of them. You can do a lot with a wet sponge on them. Good morning, everyone. Well, it's the next morning, about 6 a.m. I've just lit the stove. Looks like our pot has done well overnight. You might be tempted at this point to turn it over, but this concrete was mixed about 5 o'clock yesterday. So this would be a very dangerous time to turn this thing over. Would likely crack. So it needs another 8 hours at least. About 5 o'clock this evening, I'll be able to turn it over. So it's about 44 degrees inside the shop now. And that's a really nice temperature for curing out this concrete. I really like making them in the winter time. It slows the Portland down and definitely makes a stronger pot. So we'll be turning it over this evening. I'll see you then. So there comes a time in every pot when it's time to man up and turn it over. It's a little stressful. It's a little awkward, but I've learned that I need to hang on to the whole thing. I need to get my hands around the top and the bottom of it, so if it slides off the bat, it's not going to hit the table. And it's just a matter of turning them over nice and easy, because it's vulnerable at this point. And at this point, the edges on it are really very soft, and you can put a nice radius on the outside and the inside. Very easy. You can just about rub it with a rubber glove, but sandpaper takes it off really fast at this point. So it's time to get the sand out of it. So I've made a mix of Portland and sand, and I do want to use fine sand for this because I wanted to get into all those cracks on the inside of the pot and get it dressed real nice. I also use it on the rim on the inside for any places that need to be filled. You can use it to fill any little place that you have. This is the time that it'll bond together really well. So I just want to go around with the sponge and just dress the inside and fill all the cracks. Make it look good. Okay, after a good sponge bath, I'm calling this one done. Definitely a one of a kind. Hope everyone's having a great bonsai day. And I'll see you next time on Bonsai by the Sea.